Okay, well, welcome back to our Improving Outcomes in Professional Building session. The first speaker today, we'd already been introduced to, and I could go back over his sort of academic achievements, but you already know that. So I'll talk about the man, the myth, and the legend, I suppose. Some say that he didn't actually grow his goatee; it came in by divine intervention one night, and that the man is so smooth and suave that when a surgeon wants to cannulate his cases, he just simply has to wink and give it a nudge, and they swoon to the floor without any problems. But without further ado, this is Mr. Jim Reagor looking at the PediPERForm Learning Network.
Has to be one of the best introductions I've ever had. I appreciate you guys being here. This is going to be kind of geared towards pediatrics. However, if you do adults, just think every time I say PediPERForm Learning Network or PLN, think perform, because there's a great adult registry out there as well that people can participate in. And we can get you some information on that as well. But what I'm going to do today is just kind of take you through the development and where we currently are. All right. Through the development and where we currently are for the PediPERForm Learning Network. I'm presenting here really on behalf of obviously a larger network of people that have put in a lot of work on this. I'm simply a figurehead, somebody that doesn't like getting up here, but will do it. And so trying to get the message out about this new network so that we can gain more folks into the process. There's other folks on this list here comprising the PLN leadership, the SRC, the Scientific Review Committee, and the Quality Improvement Committee. And all the people that are on these lists, and quite frankly, a lot of people that I didn't have room to list, they all know the same thing. And that is that they all recognize that there's a significant gap between the data or the evidence and our everyday practice. And we all understand that. We all see that. So with that realization, we developed this PediPERForm Learning Network to leverage congenital and pediatric perfusion into a registry, and while partnering with a group of registries that fall under what's called the Cardiac Networks United, or CNU. And we're going to do this in order to be able to better support QI and research projects within the congenital perfusion community. Ultimately, our goal is really to help improve, obviously, congenital cardiac surgical outcomes and the value of not only for the patients and the families, but also for the clinicians and the medical teams. So over the last few years, and through a lot of effort and teamwork, basically we developed the data fields. We worked on standardizing definitions, which we were able to pull a lot of really well-developed definitions from the adult PediPERForm registry. We engaged those folks initially, probably about 10 years ago. Folks like Donnie Lakoski and Theron Paw, who were very involved in the development and the maintenance of that registry through the Michigan Cardiothoracic Surgical Quality Improvement Collaborative. And we are able to learn a lot from them, learn a lot about how to do things, what not to do. And then we engaged our vendors, Cardio Access and Lumetics. If anybody puts in any STS data at their institutions, you're familiar with these platforms. We got together with our vendor for the data repository, which is Arbormetrics, where all the data gets sent and collated. We worked on the governance structure for the learning network for PLN. We formed the executive committee, the SRC and the QIC, which I showed you a few minutes ago, and really kind of worked through to establish all of the structural pieces of the registry along with the actual registry data fields and definitions. We created a charter for the whole thing, solidified the committees and the members. And while the executive committee has been meeting for quite a while now, the SRC and the QIC are really just now starting to get going. Those two groups are in the process now of developing their processes and their systems to go through. For example, the SRC will be the ones that look at and approve or send back for modification request for data. from the system, and projects that go through the system and use the data out of the system. One of the really awesome things about this process is falling under Cardiac Networks United. We have the ability not only to pull data from PLN, but also from the other registries that are within Cardiac Networks United. And if you're not familiar with it, there's a number of registries. One of them is PC4. So it's the Pediatric Collaborative, which collects data from the ICU. There's PAC3, which collects data from the step-down units or the acute care units, the floor. There's CNOC, which is the Neurocognitive Developmental Outcomes Network, which runs neurocognitive stuff out for years and years and years. There's NPC-QIC, which is a group that's been around for quite a while that focuses on primarily hypoplastic left hearts and kids that get the Norwood and the Glenn and then move on to the FON network, the Fontan network. So we're able to partner with all of these organizations, and we all don't have to collect the same data. We can collect our perfusion data, and then we can link it to their data. Imagine being able to look out years for neurocognitive outcomes, looking with some pump data on that as well. So these are all pediatric organizations and pediatric learning networks, but the possibility to do this exists throughout all of our opportunities with the Adult Perform Registry, the STS, and a lot of other organizations. So we had 7 charter institutions, which included Nationwide, CHOP, Norton's in Louisville, UT Southwestern, CHOA, Medical City Dallas, and Children's Mercy in Kansas City, all of which have committed to participating in the network, and including the 3 founding institutions, which were University of Michigan, Colorado Children's, and Cincinnati. We had 10 sites at the outset. Of these 10 sites, 7 of us have completed the contracting efforts and are currently submitting data to the registry. And we've been submitting data as far back as October 1st of 2021. For the rest, we're either waiting on the contractual documents or letters of intent from them as they work through that system, or the onboarding process. We have a pretty lengthy onboarding process with each institution. I won't get into it, but it ensures that they understand the definitions, they understand the data fields, and they understand how to collect the data that we're asking them to collect based on the definitions that we've developed. There's about 120 institutions in the U.S. that perform congenital surgery. There's about 40,000 children that get heart surgery every year. And of course, you know that not all of those kids get bypass. But what I think is really kind of amazing is that out of the list of institutions that you see here that have either already committed and are already collecting data or are committed to begin, we've got an opportunity already here to start collecting over 10% of the case data on 10% of the cases that occur within the United States. Now, 10 or 12 centers doesn't sound like a lot out of that 120, but just to give you some examples of how we compare to those other registries that I told you about that started up even as far back as 10 or 12 years ago. NPC-QIC, the Hypoplast Network, they started with 6 centers, and now they have 69. PC4, the ICU registry, 2009 also started with 6, and now they're at 69 domestic institutions as well. Action, which is the pediatric MCS learning collaborative, they started with 5 in 2017 and now have 57 domestic sites and 7 international sites. So with those numbers, we're actually ahead of the game by quite a bit. Within our first year, we've got double what those other registries had in their first year. So we're on a pretty good pace. In addition to that, these are some other centers that have contacted us and are looking to possibly participate, and we're in talks with them to see if we can pull that off with them. Right now, we are only taking institutions as participants whose unit also participates in PC4. And the reason for that is we are a module of PC4, which allows us to be able to use the IRBs and the contracts and all that jazz that they've already gone through to be participants of PC4. And you just add a little side note that now you're also a member of PLN, and we don't have to worry about any data use agreements or IRBs or anything like that. We're already in the system. Now, while we've just started collecting data, we've really had, we feel like we've already really had a significant impact on the conduct of perfusion for the congenital cases within the learning network. One of the goals is to kind of harmonize how we do things. That's something that Action has done really, really well. And like I said, Action is the MCS collaborative for pediatrics. They get everybody together and they decide we're all going to do this way. Now, we started slow. We're all going to start collecting data the same way. We're not saying you got to go do perfusion a particular way, but maybe down the road when the data shows there's a right way to do something or a best way to do something, then we could move into that as well. But in the short term, we've already had a pretty significant impact on at least how the data is collected. As you know, a lot of data or a lot of studies that are out there right now, they're great. You know, in my center is just as bad at this as anything else. You know, the data that we collected it how we collect it. By the way, we think we need to count prime volumes. By the way, we think we need to look at anticoagulation, whatever it is. So it's our little microcosm, and we did it our way. And then we published data on it. Well, that just means that it works at our hospital. It doesn't mean it works anywhere else. So if we can harmonize the way that everybody collects the data and at least starts with the definitions in the same way, then the results that come out of the papers and the research that come out of this network will have a little bit better ability to generalize those results. Just one small example of this, you know, the question, everybody talks about prime volume within the pediatric network, and we, of course, which then gets extrapolated into blood transfusions. And somebody will say, well, we cut our prime volume down by 100 mLs. Well, that's great. How did you calculate that prime volume, right? Does it include dynamic reservoir volume? Does it include a hemoconcentrator if you use that during the case? Does it include your cardioplegia set? Does it include the amount that the surgeon cuts off at the field when he attaches a cannula? You know, how do you do that? And if it's done differently everywhere, then really the prime volume number means absolutely nothing in any kind of research. So we've standardized what that prime volume calculation is. And then that means that everybody looks at it the same way. And when we publish data out of it, then it means that at least we know that that number is exactly the same for every institution or calculated the same way for every institution. So let's talk a bit about the data we collect. There are a couple of ways to collect the data at these institutions. I previously mentioned Lumetics and CardioAccess. They have modules developed for these. And so if you use CardioAccess for your STS data or your PC4 data, you can use that system. Lumetics the same way. We also have centers that have developed their own in-house systems. Kansas City Mercy prefers to do their own data management and generation of modules. So they don't use CardioAccess or Lumetics, but they can follow the data specs and do the same thing anyway. Here you see a couple examples of Lumetics on the left and CardioAccess on the right. And I know you can't really see them very well, and I apologize for that. But basically, all the data collection methods will follow the same data specs and collect the same data with the same definitions and the same rules of entry of that data. We collect about 150 fields. And I can see people kind of like, that's a lot. That's a lot of data to put in for one case. Well, the good news is much of what we currently collect should be standard perfusion record data that's collected in your pump record already. We started out with the personnel, as you can see here, and to answer the question right off the bat, we do collect surgeon and perfusionist, but I'll show you here in just a minute. When you look at the data in the real-time system on Arbormetrics, you cannot see other institutions' data down to the case level or the surgeon or the perfusionist level. It's just all aggregated, and I'll show you some examples of that. But you can, at your own institution, break down your cases by surgeon, by perfusionist, by combo. We're getting ready to add an anesthesiologist. And so nobody else can see that, but you can see that data, and you can see the same types of reports and graphs based on your institution only, and then also based on the whole PLN network. Equipment information is collected, like rollers, centrifugal pumps, you know, all that stuff that we're all always interested in, cannula size and type, manufacturer, and that sort of thing. There's also high and low temperatures, temperature separation of bypass. what cardioplegia you used and how much you gave, whether you used alpha stat or pH stat, blood gas management, and at what temperature you employed those strategies. Lab values were also collected, which let us look at anticoagulation, renal function, hematocrit and lactates. We track volumes for fluid management, as well as information around other techniques like ANH or RAP and VAP. And there's also 5 post-operative fields that we collect. The first, hematocrit and creatinine in the ICU, peak 48-hour creatinine, peak lactate in the first 24 hours, and then 24-hour chest tube output. Now, I know that sounds like a lot. However, pretty much all of this, like I said, except for the post-op variables, are part of a complete pump record. And to help out the data entry of those 150 different fields, we provided thumbprints for equipment, prime, and circuit constituents. So as you can see, hopefully on the drop down there, there's 3 menus that are customized to fit your institution, and your institution develops those and places it in. So if you always, on a less than 8 kilo patient, if you always use an FX05 with a 3/16 quarter, with a 1/4 inch boot, with a particular hemoconcentrator, then you just click that circuit definition and it populates all those other fields for you. So it'll do that for equipment, circuits, and then prime constituents as well. So that makes things move a little bit quicker on the data entry. As I previously mentioned, one of the most powerful things about this data collection is the fact that we're all going to do it the same way. Our definition of prime volume is the same. How we calculate residual prime volume, residual volume left in the pump at the end of the case is the same. How we determine autotransfusion collection volume, it has a specified calculation and a specified definition. And I'll tell you, the way we've decided to do these things is not likely perfect. There's a lot of smart people on that first slide that I showed you with all those names, but I'm on there, so clearly we probably screwed some things up. So while I don't think we could argue that one of the ways we're doing things is wrong, there certainly could be better ways to do it and better ways to define some of the fields that we have. And one of the great things about this learning collaborative, this learning network, is all the participants are going to have the opportunity to modify those fields as a consensus as we move down the road. So there's clinical champions at each institution, and those folks and other people at those institutions will be invited to PLN meetings in which we'll sit down and kind of geek out about all this kind of stuff and figure out the best path to go, what we're going to do for publications, quality improvement opportunities, and all that stuff. Now, to get into what the PLN can provide for the participating institution, because that's really where the ROI is, right? This is what you have to be able to show your institution that it's worth participating in this. What are they going to get out of it? Each center has access to the database, and as you can see on these slides, we have a variety of benchmarking reports that are available, and we established these initially. But again, these reports and the future reports are going to be decided by the participants. What do they want to see? What does the network want to see? How do they want to benchmark themselves against each other with all the data that we're collecting? And to begin, we have just a few basics, the case mix, equipment usage, and the data quality reports. As you can see below that, which isn't quite ready for prime time though, is the blood utilization report. That's the next one we've been working on, and we're probably about a week and a half from getting that released. And in addition, we're working on prime constituent and conductive bypass reports, which are probably a couple months out. Before we take a look at these reports, so I want to explain a little bit about what you're looking at and how we look at the data. Each one of these institutions on this slide, this is a blinded PLN report. So this is aggregate data from all the institutions participating in PLN. And each institution here is represented, of course, by one of the bars on the chart. The blue bar with the star at the top indicates your institution. So for the purposes of this, that's Cincinnati Children's. So I can take a look at this graph and I can see kind of where we land. But if somebody's doing better than us, how do I learn from them? How do I know who they are? Just looking at this graph just tells me, oh, whoever that gray bar is up there, but they're doing really well. Well, that doesn't help me anymore. So one of the conditions of participation is that you'll provide data transparency at the institutional level. So, and by data transparency at the institutional level, I mean, I can break down another institution's data to the case level in aggregate data and for a given measure. So all the cases together, give me a number. Then if I hover over the bar on the chart, a site number pops up. The clinical champions that I mentioned at each institution are the only ones that have password protected access to the site key. And so those folks can then go to the site key, they can find out who that site is, and they can contact the PLN clinical champion at that institution and have a conversation. This is how PC4 and some of the other registries, which unblind their data, has chosen to go about it. And so we kind of chose to just follow the same process because it's been working well for them. But with this system, we still have a level of data security that hopefully prevents unauthorized use of the screens. Now, of course, anybody sitting out here right now or at another meeting where I'm displaying data could take a snap of it and do something they shouldn't. But we're doing our due diligence to try and make sure that we're able to share what we can and learn from each other as best we can while still protecting the data. As to the layout, you'll see at the top number across all the particular reports you'd pull up is the number of patients, the number of independent patients, and then the number of pump runs or records within the case that make up that data that you're looking at. To the right are filters, which include date range, age, weight, stat category, what procedure was done, the bypass time, and whether or not you use circ arrest. And these are common across all of the graphs, so we can filter by any of this information. And so, as I was mentioning, that's an example of the blinded graphs. And this is an example here of a case mix report, which shows the institutional registry. So this is Cincinnati Children's. This is at the institutional level. There's no other information in here about other participants in PLN. This is just us. And as I hope you can see here, we have the previously mentioned filters there on the right, with the addition now of the surgeon and the perfusionist, and to come will also be the anesthesiologist. So now I can break down the graph with those filters as well. So if I want to look at how I'm performing against one of my other team members, I can do so. If I want to look at pump times for particular surgeons compared to other surgeons, I could do so. So, I'm sure there can be some really interesting conversations, fortunately, based on data at your institution using this information. Just below that graph, just to take you down the page a little bit, there's just another visualization. On the same page, you'll see a drop-down menu up there at which you can filter again down to another measure and gives you a secondary filter to narrow down the results even further. And then below that is just a trend line graph that shows you all the information you're looking at across a period of time. You can break that all the way down to the day or stretch it out to the year. Currently, so that was a case mix report. We also have equipment reports, as I mentioned, that you can see what everybody is using for what particular patient population. This is just an example of what the arterial line size is that's being used for 0 to 6 kilo range patients. To get there, we have a 0 to 3 kilos, and then we have a 3 to 6. You just click on the 0 to 3 and the 3 to 6 range, and you can look at that 0 to 6 range. You can see that we're here again represented by the star, and on the bar we use 3/16" line for our kids up to 6 kilos. So you can see that bar is just completely blue there. However, some others use 1/8" and 1/4". So in this case, and like I was mentioning earlier, one of the powerful opportunities here is that I can call that center if I want to move to an 1/8" line and get their experiential expertise on that. I can ask them questions like what their flow cutoffs are for that 1/8" line, what line pressures might they tolerate, silly little stuff like, well, how do you make an 1/8" connection to a 3/16" tube or something like that, or a 1/4" line with, a 1/4" connector on a next-gen cannula? What are you doing to do that? And get that information. It doesn't sound like much because we kind of all do that a little bit, sitting at the bar, having a cold beer. We talk about those things, but here you can really drill down, see who's doing what, and really get that really good information from them. Not just every once in a while at a meeting, but all the time, day by day. One last example and kind of a sneak peek at what's to come. We're currently validating a few other reports, like I mentioned earlier, including blood utilization, a prime report, and a conductive bypass report. This one's a work in progress still a little as well, but It's an example of our blood utilization report, and you can select all blood in blood products, which is what you see here. You can break it down again by the age, the weight, the type of case. And finally, the data can also be broken down by percentage of cases that say you want to look at how many cases you're given packed red blood cells. You click on packed red blood cell, you click on prime, on bypass and off bypass, and then the filter for percentage of cases, and you could look at the whole thing. There's also an additional report for your institution view where you can break all those results down, like I mentioned before, by perfusionist or by surgeon, or in the future by anesthesiologist. So that's where we're at right now. In the future, our first database update is coming this year, and that's just going to be cleaning up some definitions. We've already learned some things along the way. You know, I read something and I think, oh, that makes perfect sense. This would be how you do it. Somebody else reads it and actually goes a completely different direction. So we're trying to clean those things up a little bit. There's, like I said, going to be the addition of the one field, which is collecting the anesthesiologist. We're working on more reports. We're going to do PLN meetings where I talked about where we kind of can all get together and have a conversation about what we want to see and how we want to see this develop. And then one of the things I'm really excited about, and we wouldn't be the first ones to do this, Rob Baker and his team down in Australia and their collaboration have been collecting continuous data for years and have some 30,000 odd cases for adults where they collect continuous data every 20 seconds for all cases. We're going to move to that. We're going to try and capture map, flow, all those things that we all talk about that currently we've really only been able to look at a point in time. Or we've looked at what's your average flow been on bypass, or what was your average map, or peaks. I'm going to collect the full thing and be able to put that into, hematocrits, DO2, VCO2, whatever you want to look at. That's going to be a challenging piece of it, but a really exciting one, because really to do that, you have to have some sort of continually collecting EMR. I think, one of the presentations we saw yesterday showed that there's a lot of people that are using electronic charting, but some of that is still manual data entry. So to be able to collect the continuous data by the second or 20 seconds or minute, we need a little more granularity in it. But the great thing is we can set this up and we can have just a few of the participating institutions participating in that, and then roll it out further as more teams come online with the capability. So I've really just touched on some of the really powerful aspects of this learning network and the associated registries. There's really a ton more to come, and we're really excited to see what we can continue to do to try and improve the care for our kids. So if you'd like more information on this, please feel free to reach out to me, or you can go to the website, PediPERForm.org. And just to wrap it up, I want to thank our partners. The Congenital Heart Alliance of Cincinnati's given us a 5-year grant that's really helped supporting our efforts. Cardiac Networks United, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel when we're talking about how to develop processes for the SRC or the QIC, or like I talked about, the blinding systems, because PC4, PAC3, Action, all those folks have already done that, and we can just, kind of shamelessly steal from them. And then, of course, AMSECT is our societal partner, and we really couldn't do anything that we're doing here without all those organizations working together. So thank you.